This is Bigger Questions with your host, Robert Martin.
Welcome to Bigger Questions. Today's big question, are we addicted to achievement? We're asking today's big question to Dr. Justine Toh. Justine is a senior research fellow at the Centre for Public Christianity, where she regularly speaks and writes about the Christian faith in the Australian media. Justine has a PhD in cultural studies from Macquarie University and admits to being a recovering achievement addict. And she joins me now. Justine, welcome to Bigger Questions.
Hey there, thanks for having me.
It's great that you can join us here today, Justine. To kick off Bigger Questions, we like to ask some smaller questions just to get us thinking. Today we're asking Dr. Justine Toh about achievement. So Justine, for our smaller questions today, I'm going to ask you about tiger parenting, which is a strict, authoritative method of parenting which is meant to raise high-achieving children. Now, Justine, are you familiar with tiger parenting at all?
I think you know the answer to this, Rob. So tiger parenting was first introduced, actually, I don't know if it was first introduced by Amy Chua, but she's a Yale law professor, and she published a book called Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother 10 years ago today. Well, maybe not today, but this year. And so she was talking about her own way of parenting her children, which has this incredible focus on academic results and achievement. And she would talk about how she would write out very careful, detailed notes commenting on what they need to do to improve their piano performance, etc., all this sort of thing. So I am familiar with tiger parenting, not to the same degree and level, let's say, as what she was doing with her children. But I grew up in a Chinese Malaysian family, and I think the experience of lots of kids with Asian backgrounds would be that their parents insist upon high achievement and good academic results. But as I was working on this book and reading the work of Justine Toh, who's a lecturer at the University of Technology in Sydney, I really appreciated her work because she studies the way that a lot of Asian migrant parents really care about selective schooling, for example, and trying to ace the test to get into those schools. She also really helped me see that it makes total sense why a lot of Asian migrants, particularly coming to a country like Australia, would want to make sure that their children can succeed because they don't have the connections, they don't have the familiarity of being in this nation for long enough to be able to develop those links with people. And so they want impeccable credentials because how can you argue with that? So it's good to kind of get the other side of it as well. And particularly for someone like me who had a lot of experience of that and quite a lot of resentment, I think you might pick up from the book as well.
Well, you're obviously very well credentialed or very, very well read and understood about what tiger parenting is. Now, I do have just one question about tiger parenting. It's our smaller question for today, and it's just one question and it's multiple choice, okay? So which of these behaviors is most appropriate then for someone labeled a tiger parent? Is it A, allowing their child to go to a sleepover for their best friend's birthday? Is it B, expecting top grades in every exam? Is it C, allowing an appropriate amount of TV watching each week? Or is it D, limiting video games to just an hour a day? So which of those is most appropriate for someone labeled a tiger parent?
I think everyone should yell at the same time what they think it is. And the answer would be B, I would say. Yeah.
It would be, yes, indeed. So Justine, you are a high achiever. You passed. You got our smaller question right. And if we had a live audience here today, they'd give you a big round of applause.
Oh, and I'd feel so fantastic.
It's an achievement for you. It's an achievement. So Justine, so you've talked, as you mentioned, you've talked a bit about tiger mums in your book, Achievement Addiction. Now, is this a stereotype of Asian high achievers, though?
It is a stereotype, and I think I was going to be stumbling into one of the biggest issues in education in this country. No one wants to be called a racist, and no one wants to be obviously seen to be resenting the fact that a lot of selective schools have mostly dark-haired populations among their students. And so I get how complicated it is. So I'm in this position where it's like, okay, I want to call out what I see the harms of this achievement addiction, but at the same time, I don't want to license racism as well. So that's a difficult thing. But I think one thing that writing this book taught me was that even though the people like me, okay, Asian migrant kids might be more obviously addicted to achievement for the reasons we've already discussed, My focus was on saying, oh, all you other people out there, you think you're not addicted. You think you can point the finger, maybe subtly, at someone who doesn't look like you and say, oh, the problem's just with them. But really, I wanted people to say, oh, actually, maybe this is all of our problems and it just doesn't look the same. Right. And this is another thing as well. I talk about in the book how the focus on high marks, etc., was what success looked like for my family. But obviously, not everyone is like that. For other people, success looks like rejecting the conventional pathway to success, which might be, the thing that my parents held up as the be all and end all, getting the job, the house, the family, etc. For some people, it's living an adventurous life and rejecting the establishment way. It's like that is what success means to them.
Sampling food from foreign countries, for example.
Yeah, that's right. And being able to be eclectic, I guess, in your taste, etc. So yeah, so I think if this book helps people to, I guess, scrutinize what their picture of success is and how much they feel that they have either hit that or fallen short about that, and then what that brings up for them, then I will think, okay, good. Everyone can recognize to some degree that they're also addicted to achievement.
So you're saying then that tiger parenting or any type of parenting is connected to a sort of a deep human desire for success and connecting success to achievement?
Yeah, I think really what I'm trying to use the tiger parenting as a window into is the way that we make an equation that our hard work is supposed to translate to worthiness, if that makes sense. So the
Yeah.
more that you work, the more you matter, I suppose. So I've got two kids, one in kindy, one in year one. They teach them about grit and growth mindset all the time. And this is that idea that you don't have to be naturally smart. No one is born smart. You can always get smarter, and that you do that by pushing yourself and achieving, right? And and not giving up. And I think that's true. And I really want my kids to learn that. But I think that what we don't talk about is the fact that there's other information that they're absorbing in the process of learning that, which is that the harder that you work, the more you'll be able to feel proud of yourself and base a sense of self-worth upon that. And I don't want to dismiss that entirely, but I think we don't talk enough about that to gently critique it.
So you've written a book, Achievement Addiction. So is it too much then to describe achievement as addiction?
I don't think that it necessarily needs to be an addiction, right? As in, and then therefore you really have to reject it in order to have a good life. I think it's just like anything, really, that your relationship to whatever it is can get out of hand. Right? I think it was Augustine, the saint, who famously said about God, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." And there's been plenty of other work done in recent years talking about how the human is essentially a lover, not a thinker. This is the work of James K.A. Smith. And what he's suggesting along the lines of Augustine is that our life has to revolve around something. And perhaps we've been made for God and our lives should revolve around him. But if not, our life will find something else to revolve around. And for me, what that has looked like is getting good marks and doing a good job.
So why is that bad though? Why is it bad to get good jobs and want to do well in life?
It's not that it's bad. I mean, obviously, you need to eat. You need to be able to provide for the people who depend on you. All of that is good, but it's all the other extra stuff that goes on in the background that we don't talk about. And I can tell you, there are so many women I know who feel, and I'm sure men feel like this as well, but I'm just more aware of what the women are going through, that when they don't achieve something or when they don't get that promotion or they don't get that job, the level of self-loathing in some ways that can be involved is profound. So it's clearly not like to get that job or to not get that job is what it is. But it's the kinds of highs that you feel when you do get the job, or the crushing lows that you feel when you don't get the job, that I think suggests that something is seriously out of whack there. So the achievement is not the problem, it's how you are in relation to the achievement.
Now, you mentioned before one of the consequences of this is self-loathing, perhaps. So is there a sense then in which achievement is then connected to our personal identity and self-worth?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And when I put it in the terms of self-loathing, but I'm also keen to stress that while this book does kind of have a a slight kind of, personal growth aspect to it. The stuff that I'm talking about is like goes right to the heart of some of the biggest crises that we've lived through in recent times. So, for example, I draw on the work of Michael Sandel and Daniel Markovits from Yale, and both of those guys actually have said that the idea of meritocracy, right? That we live in a system where you, through your hard work, can make a success of your life. That our meritocratic world has been at the heart of Brexit, right? The vote to leave the European Union, and also the election of Trump, okay, in the US. And what they mean by that is that it's like society. We've seen a big division between the meritocratic elites, the people who work for the West Wing. I'm sure, your listeners will know what I mean. So you're really fast talking people like me in some ways, well educated, clever, smart, they can run things. There's been a division between those guys and the people who aren't necessarily that well credentialed, might have more working class or blue collar jobs. And in some ways, these guys, Markovits and Sandel, were saying that what is at the heart of both those events is this rejection of the meritocratic elite, that this idea that you think you're better than me, that just because you've got, fancy degrees and you dress like that, whatever, you think that you're better. So that's not necessarily a self-loathing if you don't achieve, but there is something of that nature going on in those, at the heart of those big events that we've seen play out. So so there is a self-loathing in a personal sense, but it can also be a feeling of rejection and not belonging, and that can play out in big ways as well.
Right. Yeah. So you've just outlined, in many ways, and your book is called Achievement Addiction. So why do you think that our culture is so addicted to achievement and this meritocracy?
Oh man, that's a big question.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah. Well, yes, it is. I don't think. Put it this way, right? If I can give a specific example, in lockdown, the last thing I expected was for house prices to go through the roof. Okay. And that's like a national thing, even though the growth has been most pronounced in Sydney and Melbourne. But I think that we're addicted to achievement because our economic system demands it of us, right? Like if you need the income of two people in order to even have a hope of buying a house, then you're in a life that demands that you are constantly thinking about your work and being able to provide in that way, because what you want a roof over your head, right? But it's also the case that we're also addicted to achievement, I think, because the only way to understand what we've achieved is in relation to what someone else has achieved or has not achieved, right? So in some ways, it can be a bit of a status game. I think it's really significant that in a school context, everyone's given a numerical mark. But that numerical mark only makes sense in relation to what other people got. Let's be honest, right? And we have that system in school, you graduate with an ATAR, an Australian Tertiary Admissions Rating, that essentially rates you. And then as you go on through life, you get a job, what you get paid, etc. All of this has the effect of ranking you in a system. And so maybe it's the case that the people who do have a roof over their heads, maybe the person next to them has a better option. And so why shouldn't I try and go for that if I can work hard? And because it says something about me as well. It speaks to my success in life.
Yeah. Is it also connected to that idea you mentioned before, that restlessness in our hearts, that we are looking for something to kind of fill a void, so to speak? So we're looking for achievements to somehow do that as well?
Yeah. And I can definitely speak from personal experience here. I mean, I think because of my upbringing and because of other things as well, I suppose I've had this complex lifelong about, am I smart? Right. And this is obviously matters to me very much because perhaps it was what my parents kind of made me think about, which I'm very grateful for as well. But I see it. I hope in a bigger picture way. So I appreciate it, but I'm also I can recognize the harms as well. And so I found myself at one point during this doctorate, in order to, I think, once and for all, prove this question for myself.
Am I smart?
That's right. But the irony of writing 100,000 words to have 3 letters PhD or 2 letters doctor sort of certify my existence and my smart existence, if I can put it in those terms, is unbelievable. Do you think after getting that doctorate I felt any better? No. Do you think after I wrote this book and published it I felt any better? No. so, so, um, yeah, so I definitely am a recovering achievement addict. And you'll notice that that is very much like resting an identity, my identity, on achievements. It's based on what I've done, right? Which obviously goes to the opposite of what I'm suggesting in the book is the actual reality of the situation. But it's a way of kind of like being a heroic savior of your own world in some ways, because look at what you've overcome, look at all the things that you've done, look at all the ways that even if you're beaten down and strung out and tired and exhausted, but man, you did this. Like, I get that high.
Yeah. Well, then comes a problem, doesn't it? Because when you get to the next challenge, you're not sure if you can actually get over that. And so hence it raises insecurities as to whether or not, did it before, but can I do it again? I'm not sure.
No, that's right. I mean, I remember someone wasn't the most, I can't remember the guy. He's like at one point the richest man in the world. And someone asked him, how much money is enough? And he's like, just a bit more. And it's exactly
right.
the same idea, just with the different thing. It's not wealth
Yes,
I'm
that's right.
chasing, it's achievement.
So you've talked about, obviously you've raised this issue in your book. Is there a solution, or is there a path to joy for recovering achievement addicts?
Wouldn't that be hilarious if I outlined a path to joy that had its own form of the to-do list, right? Achieve your own victory over achievement. Here is the secret.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, my book is not in that personal growth kind of way that offers you an agenda for how you might triumph on the other side of this. I think what I really wanted to do was to just get people to imagine this idea that we are living in a cultural story where achievement is positioned as a very important thing that needs to matter so deeply to you. And all I really wanted to do was to bring that cultural story into conversation with a Christian story, specifically a parable that Jesus told of the workers in the vineyard. And just say, wow, look at what story is projected, or what world is projected from the story that Jesus tells, and how does that compare with, and how does that illuminate some of the blind spots, let's say, of our own cultural story of achievement. Because I think, Rob, that stories are tools of change, right? They are radical. They announce a different way. And especially with Jesus being the one to say, this is what the kingdom of God is like. Imagine this. Like, that is incredible, because it's like, this is the world that you're in. We just recognize it as reality, but it's really, we're living in a story. But what we need is a better story to live into. And I think that's what Jesus does in that parable.
Well, why don't we have a look at that parable? Because as you said, in the Gospel of Matthew, which is one of the 4 biographies of Jesus' life that we have, Jesus does share a parable about workers who are hired to work in a landowner's vineyard. Now, they were all hired at different times in the day and all agreed to work in the end for the same pay, 1 denarius. But at the end of the day, when they were all paid, some weren't happy. And it says in Matthew 20:11-12, when they received it, their pay, they began to grumble against the landowner. These who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. So, Justine, do you appreciate their disgruntlement? It seems a bit unfair to be paying the same for 1 hour's work as a whole day.
Myself, as an achievement addict, and anyone else who decides that they are an achievement addict, would identify hugely with the people who are angry that they got cheated, right? Like, I'm sitting there going, I did all that work. Doesn't any of that count? What do you mean you're going to pay them the same amount? The same? No. Because as I said, right, what I've achieved only makes sense in relation to what someone else did or did not achieve.
That's right, yeah.
And so those workers, what Jesus is identifying, makes total sense. It hits very close to home, this parable.
Right, yes. Well, then Jesus answers them by saying, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last. So, Justine, how does Jesus' answer here speak to our world focused on achievement?
Yeah, wow. Do you know, the biggest thing that jumps out at me is the way Jesus says, what's your problem? I'm really generous. What does it matter to you? You agreed to work for this. Who cares if I'm generous, right?
That's right, yes.
And I love that, because it takes the focus off what someone has done to deserve their pay, so to speak, but it actually puts the focus back where it belongs, which is on the generosity of the landowner, i.e. God, I suppose, in this parable. And so it's true. It's like, look, the achievement addict really wants to think about and is totally preoccupied with their own efforts, their own successes, what they've done in order to get to this point. But really, this parable invites you to appreciate the reverse of that, which is that maybe what counts most in life is not what you have achieved, but what you have received. And that, in a way, actually puts everyone on an equal playing field, because those critics of meritocracy that I earlier talked about have said it's actually not a system of equal opportunity. It's not about, like, because formerly in an aristocracy, you were born to your position in life. You could be born a peasant, you could be born the king, and no one, you didn't do anything to earn or not earn that. That's just how it was. But in a meritocracy, the son of the king and the son of a peasant are in an equal playing field situation. But really what it ends up doing is kind of saying, oh, the ones who work the hardest are the worthiest, right? Which is exactly what this is what the workers are saying in this parable. And yet, really, the picture of God's kingdom that Jesus sketches out for us is one of not equal opportunity, so to speak, but equal value and equal love and equal grace, right? So it's not dependent on what you've done. The playing field is leveled by the fact that Jesus is equally gracious to everyone. And that makes people like me really angry and really humbled. But at the same time, it makes total sense. Like, I did nothing to be born into a family that valued achievement. I did nothing to be born into this country, which gave me the opportunities that I have. I did nothing to be born into this century, which allowed me to be able to have these opportunities in the first place. So why don't we focus more on what we've been given rather than what we've done to earn anything?
Well, so the last sentence that Jesus says here, so the last will be first and the first will be last. Does that take the sting out of some of our achievement addiction, perhaps? And also, maybe, is that a challenge to the tiger parenting mindset? I mean, I don't know how a tiger parent would respond to that the last will be first and the first will be last. That's terrible.
Well, it's a really provocative picture, isn't it, of what ultimate reality is about. We live in a survival of the fittest world sort of thing, right, where it is a desperate scrabble for limited resources, and so you do what you can to survive and thrive. But if, as Jesus says, the first will be last and the last will be first, then really what he's encouraging us to do is to say, do you know what? You can get deceived by the different status games that you play, right? You think that this person is better because they're richer or they're more beautiful or they're clever or they have a better job or a bigger house or a better car, whatever. But it's like, no, everyone matters, right? And it doesn't, and all those worldly kind of ways that we use to gain status over each other, they count for nothing in the end, because in the end, it's about you being before God, and none of that matters. So if you think about it, that gives you the grounds to understand that everyone is equal, and that, like, a girl in a favela in Brazil, living in a slum, and, Joe Biden, there's no actual difference between them, really, in God's eyes. That is an incredibly provocative vision, and one that should humble the tiger parents and the achievement addicts of this world, and does, when, if I think about it hard enough. And I just think, wow, this grace just knows no end, and it really does overturn the world and everything that we think about the world. So I'm like, I think amazing.
Amazing grace. Yes, yeah. So does this mean, though, that Christianity denies human achievement? So a commenter on Reddit once claimed that Christianity is evil and anti-human because they claimed all of the amazing and good things that humans have done mean nothing according to Christianity. At best, such accomplishments are laughably inadequate attempts to overcome the burden of sin with earthly works, or at worst, they are hubristic challenges to God's infinite glory. Nothing humans do can ever satisfy their creator. So does the Christian faith and the appeal to grace deny and undervalue human achievements?
This is a good question. I think that Reddit commenter was a little bit influenced by Nietzsche somehow. But I do think that there is a really good challenge here. That, are we the slackers, I suppose? I think in terms of the spiritual sense, yes, we are the slackers. We don't believe you can earn your way to God. But at the same time, this does in no way licenses a do you know what? Let's just cruise on through life because no problem, whatever I do doesn't count for anything in the end. You're not saved by what you do, but you're saved to do things, right? And I think that what better way to honor what you've been given by God than by doing the best work that you possibly can, right? But in a way that, again, it gets tricky because achievement addicts like me have a terrible radar for this sort of thing, but in a way that is life-giving and doesn't end up grinding you up or stealing you away from the lives of those who depend upon you and those you love. So I think it's tricky, and that we need to make sure that we have those tensions right. But I think that one beautiful way that we can honor God is to do amazing work. So, and I realize that sounds ironic and or strange perhaps in light of what I've been saying about achievement in general, but yeah, I'm willing
But
to
the motivation
rest
is
in
very
that.
different.
The
It's very
motivation is
different.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not in order to be something, it's because you are something.
Yeah. And there's a freedom in that. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, Justine, as a self-confessed recovering achievement addict, what difference has the Christian faith made for you?
It's made an incredible difference. Like I wouldn't suggest for a moment that, the genesis of this book happened the moment I became a Christian. As in, like, I realized, I was raised by people who taught me to strive for any sense of significance in this life. And look, the gospel says that my significance is not dependent on my striving. This is the answer for me. No, it wasn't like that. But as I've gone on in my Christian journey, I was there going like, how come no one's talking about this? Why does no one call this out and say this is a problem? And I just wondered whether my particular biography provided an opportunity to talk about this thing. And I think it actually is a central aspect of the Christian faith, the primacy of grace and the fact that God has been so kind to all of us.
So, Justine, are we addicted to achievement?
Yes, we are addicted to achievement, but there is hope for us. And that is always good news because I believe very strongly that our life and everyone's life does not depend on what we do, but on what we very gratefully, hopefully, receive.
Well, let me leave you with some of the Bible's answer to the big question, are we addicted to achievement? From Matthew 20:16. So the last will be first, and the first will be last. I look forward to you joining us next time for bigger questions. Thanks very much to our guest today, Dr. Justine Toh.
Thanks so much.